Hi there. If you are tuning into this podcast, it means one of two things. Either you have no clue about managing your finances or you want to take them to the next level. Either way, we've got you covered. Financially Ever After is for the modern day Indian professional who is ready to take control of their financial journey. So let's start building your financial future one episode at a time. Welcome to Financially Ever After. Hello and welcome to the sixth episode of TMs. I'm Medha, co-founder of WealthUp.me, and along with my co-founder Ankit Agarwal, we created this podcast to help you navigate the world of personal finance and make informed decisions about your money. So in today's episode, we'll be discussing the financial scars that people have and how to overcome them. Our guest tonight is Aditi. Aditi is an ex co founder and product leader with over 10 years of experience in product growth and leading teams. She bootstrapped her startup to a revenue of 4 CR, and she's very strong at understanding the drivers of human behavior and designing engaging products to shape them. With global work experience and having worked with users from more than 42 countries and herself having lived in over 12 countries, we thought, would be the perfect person to talk about financial literacy and personal finance and this topic of financial scars because this actually came up during one of our conversations. So, hi Aditi, welcome to the show.
Hi Medha, thanks for having me.
Cool. So I thought, we could start this conversation by, right off the bat, talking about our own financial scars, something that has been on our mind or, experiences that we've had in the past. So Ankit, would you like to start?
So one of the scars that I can talk about is I come from a big family, and out of all the chachas and mamas, our family was sort of least well off. I remember as a child, I felt I was being treated differently because our family couldn't afford the best of things. I started from a background of, you can call it, scarcity, and I learned that it is better not to spend money on something that is not urgent. I suppose my passion of finance for helping others comes from feeling I had when I didn't have money. In preparing for this episode, I realized that my financial scars are what pushed me to be financially successful, to become financially free at 29. But even today, when I don't have any liquidity issues or money problem, I still procrastinate. Many a times, I still procrastinate on a number of purchases, even when logically it makes sense to do it sooner than later. For example, booking a flight. But that is the kind of impact my background has on me.
Sure. And I think that's why it's so important to discuss this. So, like Ankit mentioned, this is not something that we even thought about. And it was only in our conversation with Aditi that this kind of came up. So, in preparing for tonight's conversation, we did some introspecting ourselves and, kind of had some revelations along the way, which we'll be sharing with you. So, Aditi, what about you? What are some things that have been experiences or scars for you when it comes to money?
Definitely have had some personal ones, but I feel that I actually want to share a story of a student of mine. So at School of Future, we had students from across the world. One of these students, she was living in Detroit in Michigan, and she built a business with us that started to do really, really well. So when the business was doing really well, she was able to, she started like purchasing small things, then eventually started getting things like purses and stuff like that. And immediately, everyone in her life would notice and would say, oh, where did you get that? And then she could go into her whole spiel of how she's running this business and how she felt about it, how strong she felt, how independent she was. Like I remember her direct quote was that I bought shoes and purses to show my peers that I now earn money and that I am now independent. So that feeling of feeling better than peers in a certain way, but also feeling independent that I have built this myself. And then when the business started to do not as well, she was still wanting to maintain that feeling, right? And it ended up this particular bad habit, so to say, was clearly a coping habit for her because she didn't want to lose that feeling of feeling independent, feeling like she's making her own money. But essentially, she ended up, falling in debt and had to involve her parents to get her out of these kind of things. But we really do need to talk about where our behaviors stem from. When we are overspending anything that we are doing in the financial realm, there's a belief system that lies at the basis of it. And if we do not analyze that belief system, if we do not really understand how certain things in our past are shaping those behaviors, it just like we are not doing justice to our own financial habits in a certain way.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So Aditi, the story that you spoke about and Ankit as well, they were both stories of scarcity, right? So if I, when I was thinking about it, my experience has been very different because I grew up in a very upper middle class kind of a family. We grew up in the Middle East, went abroad for my education. So, for me, lack of money or scarcity was never a feeling. So what that ended up doing is that I always felt like, पैसे तो आ जाएंगे, like of course there's like coming from a place of abundance. I always thought that this would remain. So as an adult, then when I stepped into my work life, I was that person who was like never asking for a raise, always settled for low pay, made really bad career decisions. And you wouldn't necessarily think of abundance as a scar, but I think that whole experience of my parents never teaching me how to budget, or never teaching me like the value of frugality, and then of course me having to learn it the hard way, then ended up becoming the scar. So very different from the two stories shared, but I think that's the whole thing, right? Like it's not necessarily associated with not having enough. That's the point that I wanted to kind of stress on. Aditi, I wanted to come back to you. So your research was actually the spark that kind of started this whole conversation. So if you can talk a little bit about what you studied and what your findings were.
Right, sure. So essentially what I was looking at is I started to get really interested in financial bad habits. And essentially the whole conversation kind of started because all my friends and luckily because of some mentors I've had in my life, I've just talked about money openly. I decided at a young age that like whatever it is, like let's just talk about it openly, because if I don't, like how the hell do I know if I'm growing as well as my peers or if I'm not growing as well as my peers? So I've just like, I've promoted this conversation essentially in my past. And then I just started to really like think through how do financial bad habits happen? Why do they happen? And is there a sort of model at work, that leads to such bad habits? Because I think a lot of times our assumption is that, and actually the assumption of pretty much every product in the market, right? And why I'm such a massive fan of Wealth Hub. Everything in the market assumes that like if I had the right information in front of me, I would make the right financial decision, which is such a dumb way of looking at any product or any human at work. Humans do not think so directly. If they did, life would be much easier. But products are much more complicated because humans think in far more complex ways. So what we actually found is that there's a sense of social media and societal expectations. Then there's this habit of us, and especially I see a lot of youngsters in India falling for this, where, people are living paycheck to paycheck. And then there's your own personal background and how you actually grew up, what your childhood was like. If you were threatened by loan sharks that you're going to be thrown out of your house if you do not fulfill the rent, obviously you're going to have a very, very different scar when it comes to like going and taking a loan from even a very established bank, right? So social media, this habit of living paycheck to paycheck, personal scars, all of this creates a lot of what I like to call mental stress and math calculation that you're doing in your head. And then it also leads to identity, self-esteem issues, this feeling like a failure, feeling like what you're doing is not enough. And essentially all of this then compounds into bad financial decisions, right? So that's the model that Medha, you wanted me to chat about. Let me know if you want me to double click on it.
Yeah. No, so what was interesting in what you said, and because we work day in and day out with clients trying to get them to make the right decision, and that's the thing, right? Humans are very illogical when it comes to money. So a client will come to us and we'll say, okay, do A, and then they'll go ahead and do B, and then they'll come back to us to help them fix it. So the thing that we identified was that financial literacy does not actually lead to better financial decision making, which is what you kind of very
100%.
pointed out. Yeah. Just because I know what is the right thing to do doesn't mean I will do the right thing. And that is where we have to understand and analyze, where our decision making is coming from. So, Ankit, since you directly talk to a lot of clients, work with them, what has your kind of experience been? Or actually, if you can share, your whole perspective on this.
So, I actually, what Aditi was sharing, it's very interesting. I mean, what you have seen growing up or what you have experienced firsthand does have a huge impact. So, actually, I was reading a research paper and that was very interesting. So, apparently, all the people who lived through Great Depression never invested in stock market after that. This may not seem like a big deal, but the US market saw it's one of the best runs after World War II. And this could have been the golden period for investors. I mean, let's say you were, say, in your 20s, when this Great Depression happened, and by the time you are in your early 50s, you would have accumulated a good amount of money, and if you would have invested it in the 40s and 50s, you would be filthy rich. But instead, all these people, chose to sit out. And probably many would have told this, the story of Great Depression and everything that they witnessed and, went through to their children too. And probably, up to a certain extent, discouraging them from investing in the stock market. So what you have seen and what your parents or, your surrounding might have seen and shared with you, that has a huge impact.
This is to both Aditi and Ankit, whoever wants to answer first. So what can these financial scars look like? Because, they look like they're so different for me versus for you, right? So what are some telltale signs or what do they look like?
First of all, I mean, just based on, the story that I told, one can be, not taking any risk. If whatever savings I have, I'll be just putting it in, say, fixed deposit or PPF, not investing anything in stock market or anything for that matter. Another thing can be, there are people who would just like to hoard money. They just want to see that money in their bank account. And that is in some way comforting for them. So I had a client and he was like, okay, so my dream is to see 100 crore in my bank account. And he was like a very smart guy, very young, making good money. And he was, so I was like, 100 crore. I mean, he was like, okay, so you may feel, it's so absurd or something. I was like, no, 100 crore is not absurd. What the absurd part is that you want to see it in your bank account. If you want to see it as your net worth, your the value of your investments, that still makes sense. But he was like, I want to see it in my bank account. And there are so many people who just leave money in their bank account and tens of lakhs. Another thing that, picking from what the story that Aditi shared, I think other completely extreme end can be retail therapy. Just buying to maybe to yourself feel better or to prove it to others. That can be another thing. Of course, my story is there about, procrastinating. So that is also there that can be impact. And actually, I thought about this one, as I mentioned earlier, about, procrastination that I do many a times in terms of making expenses. It is probably because of, when I was going through there preparing for this, that is when I realized probably this is because of one of my financial scar. So yeah, here are a few of the things that I could think of. I mean, if Medha or Aditi, if you want to add something.
Right. Hoarding, I think, is definitely a very common symptom. I think also, one of the things that we don't often think about is that who's going to give you money therapy? You know what I mean? No one really offers that. And I feel that's one of the most essential tools that we actually need to get over some of these things and we'll talk obviously more about that in overcoming stuff. But I think literally the financial world also has to sit up and be like, this is not just a lack of information problem. This is also a problem of people not paying attention to the right kind of issues and understanding that hoarding money, not feeling like you can take any risk. At this point, there's barely any risk attached to putting your money in a fixed deposit. You can access it literally anytime. Maybe you will not get exact X that you were promised. You'll get slightly lesser. But it's barely, there is almost zero risk, right? Even with mutual funds, there's so many stable funds at this point. Even those things I do not see. I have peers in my own friend network, people that are exceptionally intelligent, some of the smartest people I know, some of the people making the most amount of money as far as I know. But they still will not do some of these basic things. And essentially, however you may put it, they are barely beating inflation, if that, right? And that just seems like you're losing money in the long run, right? And that long term is not even 5 years, 10 years, but literally that year itself.
One thing that I want to share, in addition to what you guys said, is that I also think that, I was coming back to like, why is it that my parents never shared their financial struggles with us, right? It's something that we don't talk about in families. We don't talk about money anyway. But so my father actually, he came from an extreme kind of, I don't know, like very, very humble beginnings. And I think he was always like wanting for things. So he had this thing that my children will not want for anything. So, like basically they will have the best of everything. And that has always been his thing, whether it was buying, like I was in 10th standard, and I got my first mobile phone, and it had to be the best phone. I had the first iPod, the first iPad, like, it was just always whatever I wanted. Firstly, I was told that you can have the best thing, but whatever he did in the background to actually make that happen, he never shared with us, which is why the guilt of me now feeling like, oh my God, I wasted so much of his money is really tough, but I think that was his kind of burden to bear, right? Like he came from this mindset that my children will have everything and the best of it. But I think, obviously that is not the right way to think about it, but yeah, we all come from our own realities and experiences. So I think that's another sign of having a financial scar.
Yeah, I agree. It can be the key. Generally, people think it's not having enough financially is something that can cause a scar. But what Meta you are sharing is it's completely from a different perspective. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, our parents are also humans with their own stories, right? It's just that I never thought about it, and I kind of blame them a little bit, right? Like, why didn't you teach me how to negotiate or, care about money? But I think, again, like now as an adult, I have like more empathy.
I think one more way in which this card like comes up, right, is, and there's a beautiful report called The Secret Financial Lives of Everyone should read it, I think, and someone should do it for India. Hint, hint, Ankit and Meda, take it up for Wealth Up, please. But essentially, there's a quote that I remember from that report which said, like, Americans set expectations for their own lifestyles based on a tapestry quilted from Instagram celebrities, YouTube videos, and the curated highlights of their friends' best moments. And honestly, this is like what all of us are doing. And especially, I had a founder friend of mine, and we were just chatting. I remember he had come over to our place, and he was just looking around, and he was like, you guys kind of live in the same kind of apartment that I live in. And literally everyone I employ, okay, so he's like a 32-year-old person. Everyone I employ lives in like this, that, whatever. He was, sharing some examples. And I do think that our young people are overspending in a certain way. I don't know where that comes from, but I think that we have to look into it deeply, right? Just because we are now making more money than we used to when we were young. Like my first salary was some 35,000. I don't remember exactly.
Same.
Yeah. And which is fine, but I genuinely think at that time also I remember I used to save 60% of my salary, 60 or 70%, like practically like I was anal about it, and I think that level of thinking has to be there. It's one of the biggest problems that I see right now, where overspending due to this sense of like managing certain level of lifestyle or certain level of social, like what you want to put on social media, things like that are guiding a lot of financial decision making, which is not maybe the best way to do it.
Yeah,
no, actually, I see that what you were saying now, that makes a lot of sense. Just inflating your lifestyle based on certain parameters, and many a times thinking ki, without even knowing the background of someone else, if you think that okay, if that person can do it, why not me? And another thing that has been happening, this is actually a completely different conversation, but lately, like 2 years back, 1.5 years back, people were getting paid really well, amazing increments. People were jumping from one job to another and getting 20, 30, 50% hikes, and their money, the salary was doubling in a year's time. And then they were just inflating their lifestyle. And I actually wrote an article about it as well back then. This is, of course, you should be riding the boat, try to make as much money as you can, but try to save it, because this is not going to last. It can't be sustainable. And the thing is that at some point, your income, the increment that you are getting, it will temper off, it will just slow down, and then the pace at which inflation is going, and the new things that are coming, you won't be able to keep up with it.
See, the other thing I was going to, we have never had such a view of each other's lives before. Like, we are sharing constantly about our lives, right? And because it's on Instagram, it has to be pretty. So it's the best of whatever we have. And it's like, I didn't know what people used to have for breakfast. No one put a photo or a video of them, like, going to the beach. But now suddenly I know everything about everyone's lives. And of course, that's not healthy. So, Aditi, any tips on, social media is not going anywhere. So what can kind of insulate ourselves?
I think to me, it's like less about insulation and more about just realizing that, and weirdly enough, because we work with teenagers a lot, right? Like, essentially what we saw is that somehow I think there's a generation in the middle which is going to probably be worse off, but like the Gen Alpha is slightly better about money than Gen Z. Like, I think it is about recognizing the generation that you were born in, the mindset that you were born into, the family that you were born into, because a lot of this thought process, right, how you think about money is as important as how much you earn. It's as important as anything else that you're doing with money. Financial literacy is not just about learning the terms or understanding nuances of funds and investment. It's about understanding who you are, how you actually think about money, what matters to you when you think about money, right? Like, what's the safety number for you to have in your account to feel safe? Great. Is that the right number? Talk to, actually people like Wealth Hub that can help guide you in terms of how to think about your investment, how to think about your risk appetite. I just think that and I think finance has always been used to exclude people, right? Like, I'm richer than you, hence I know more about finance than you, hence I will do better. That is total BS in today's world. I think people can really, and people are, really doing what they can and learning a lot. But I think that element of analyzing yourself and your upbringing and your mindset about money is really, really critical. Knowing your scars is the first step towards healing, essentially. So, that advice of know thyself comes from Iliad, one of the oldest advices on the planet, but still very relevant even in this realm of finance.
Oh, that's actually very well said, Aditi. And what you said, the first step is like, acknowledging that. And I think, with that, we can maybe move to just understanding, how is it that we can heal our financial scars and how we can overcome. So I think that, of course, with solving any problem, the very first step is about acknowledging it, and sort of also, I think, validating your emotions that are associated with these scars. And what people can do, and the first thing is, and very importantly, is like, you have to be honest about this. You have to be honest with yourself and introspect what is it that is causing this, or what might have caused this. And if it is difficult for you to understand how to open up, I think it's also important, as with any problem, I think, you are comfortable seeking support. Talk to a friend, or maybe be a part of a community that can help you open up and understand these. Or if you, as Aditi was saying, that there is no financial therapist as such, but if you're able to find one, definitely talk to that person, so that you can, in a non-judgmental setup, you're able to let those emotions out of your chest. And of course, after that, it is also about how can you reframe, and you should be tricky. How is it that you can reframe the narrative around the financial scar, and instead of seeing it as a failure, how is it that you can see it can be a valuable learning? I think, do you want to add something on that, from the financial scar? How is it that people can see okay, this happened, and XYZ, and what are how is it that I can learn from that?
I think, like, as what you said, Ankit, that really makes a lot of sense. Looking at essentially, it's like any scar, right? If you look at it, and actually in social impact spaces, there's this beautiful concept of wound gift. Like, the deeper you look into the scars and the wounds that you have, they essentially can become your gifts. So I think there's definitely an element of just seeing things, not being judgmental about them, not being and just know for a fact that a lot of these behaviors are irrational. And like, who said that rationality is the end all of everything? It is fine. Like, if it is irrational, it is what it is. And I think just facing that fact and realizing that, yeah, obviously if someone gave me a logical math equation to solve, I would solve it differently. But this is not math here right now, right? And actually, the deeper you go into math and physics also, they become highly imaginative, highly engaging. But anyway, that's a side note. But my point is that whatever it is that you are able to recognize in yourself, right? Like, think through, how do you think about your bank balance? What is the amount of bank balance that actually makes you feel good? And then once you have that number in your head, think through, like, is this actually what I need for emergencies? Is this actually what I need to support my family in need? Am I missing out on certain things? Like, if you are, essentially just increasing your bank balance, but maybe not thinking through insurance or life insurance, all of those things, which is where I think either wealth up, or if not wealth up, even like whatever tool that you have at your end, please do use it to understand more about how safe you really are when it comes to an emergency. Because I think sometimes by not wanting to look, by not wanting to stand in that pain, we end up hurting ourselves more.
It's interesting, Aditi, you brought up the point of insurance, right? Because of course we know that the insurance penetration in India is like really low, but there are always exceptions to this case as well. I don't know if Ankit remembers who I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, quickly, I'd like to share that story. So we have a client, a very young guy in his early 20s. Joined his first sort of full time kind of job. So he works for a company in Bangalore, but it's a remote work. So he lives in a sort of a tier 3 or maybe a tier 4 location with his parents, making really good money. So, in one of our initial conversations, I was talking to him, and he asked me about life insurance. Okay, if I should take life insurance, and generally speaking, even though ideally you should try to take a life insurance as early as possible, because the premium will be very low, which is very good for you. But generally, younger people are not very keen, or on life insurance. That is not the first thing that I start talking about. And he was like, okay, so what is the maximum insurance coverage I can get? So I answered, and then I told him, okay, this is a very good coverage, and you don't really need it. And he said, no, but I still want to buy it. And I said, why? And he said, so he lost his dad when he was pretty young, and then his family, had to go through a lot of financial hassles. He paid for his own education, his younger brother's education, and helping at home as well with expenses through part-time jobs. And he doesn't want his family to struggle again financially ever. I mean, if something was to happen to him. So he was like, okay, I'll just buy the best, the most expensive, the biggest coverage that I can get for life insurance, so that, my family is taken care of if something was to happen to me. So this is another, sort of extreme, that can be there.
Yeah, and again, not super logical, but again, you can't really put it in the realm of logic. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about, building comes to finances. So I don't think we can do anything about the past, but how do we, what are some things that we can do to make sure that we're more resilient going forward?
Yeah, let me bring up Sneha as well as Leslie.
Yeah.
Hi Sneha, please go ahead.
Hi, firstly, thank you so much for conducting audio podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. I had to ask a question related to one of the things you guys discussed. So you guys talked about how saving your incomes is very important, especially if you're getting a higher salary or you're getting an increment. But that's very contrary to what people usually think. So if I were given an income raise, I would probably save a percentage of that increment, but most the maximum percentage of the increment I would spend. So what commonly people, I believe, would think is that, okay, savings is important, but saving 50% or 60% of your income is not very common for most people, because we think that, okay, we live our life only once, and if we are not spending our say increase salary or higher income in improving our lifestyle, then what's the point of having so much money? Well, people would save, but probably not like as much as 50 to 60% of their income.
So Sneha, what you are saying, it's a very valid point, and 50 to 60% is not always possible, but 0% is also not good, na? It's always about maintaining a
Right.
balance. Okay, particularly when you're starting up, starting person, you're just starting your career. Say initially for 2-3 months of your first job, even if you're not saving almost anything, it's fine, because again, I'm not being very rational here, but for the first time you are seeing that money for which you don't need to be accountable for, to and give sort of a complete hisab to your parents, give where did this money go. So even for those 2-3 months, even if you want to blow sort of all your income, that is also fine, but after that you need to start saving. Start with any number. Generally, we say, okay, you should save minimum 20%. Start from there. But it is important to start and see if you can increase that percentage. And what you were talking about in terms of increment. So we actually, we have also sort of, came up with a sort of a formula for that. Suppose your salary is increasing by, say, 20%. Whatever your expenses were before the increment, whatever your expenses were, increase it by half of this percent. So if your salary increases by 20%, increase your expenses by 10%. Automatically, you will end up saving more as in a disproportionately more. Instead of just 10% more savings, you will be saving something like 12, 13%, 15% more. Okay, so you are sort of rewarding yourself, and it is extremely important to reward yourself when you have worked really hard for that increment or a bonus, right? But it's also important that if you keep just spending almost entire increment that you got, because that is how you're generally speaking, if you're doing well in your career, your salary will keep going up. But if you are in the mindset, okay, I'll keep increasing my expenses in the same proportion as my increment, your savings will still remain the same percentage. Initially, maybe you were making lesser money, so you were not in a position to save more. But when you can, why not?
Yeah. And I think another interesting thing to consider here is, Sneha, like the way I think of it, no, it's very simple. We are human first, and then everything else happens. And at that human core level, obviously you want to reward yourself when you're doing well in your career. And I also think it's about knowing who you are, knowing what makes you happy. So I'll give you a very real example. Okay, my brother and his wife, they're both doing really well, all of that. And one of the things is they have a budget that they call like failures, or I don't know exactly the terminology, I've forgotten that they use, but essentially they plan for things that they know that they're going to fail at. So what I'm trying to say, like I'll give simplest example, okay? My brother will replace his, like there is no way that he will have earphones that he will not lose. So he will order those earphones in bulk. He will plan to lose the earphone that he's going to lose, so that he doesn't feel bad about it when it happens. Because at the end of the day, certain habits are just habits, and they're part of us, right? So he plans for those kind of things in advance. And that's just a very like micro example, but you can apply it to your business as well. You know that you're going to have a space where you will experiment with certain amount of money. So have that experimentation budget, have that plan. Another example, right? Like we used to think that we spend so much on Swiggy orders. Like in my head, I was thinking I'm spending something like 50,000 per month on Swiggy orders. But we actually sat down one month and like looked at all of whatever, amount we had actually spent. And it turned out to be a far lesser. And I realized, okay, I was feeling bad about something that was not even happening. So I think just the point that we're trying to make is that, yes, like be aggressive. I honestly say be aggressive about saving, because I feel like money is there to be spent on experiences and things that you value the most. For me, I love like taking one international trip every year. So I will plan for it. Maybe I'll spend lesser on some domestic trips, but I will plan for that big international one. So it just depends on what your priorities are. But unless and until you really articulate them, there's no way for you or for your, the calculation that you're doing in your head to actually be seamless.
No, actually, I think what you said about spending on those experiences that you enjoy. Just going back to what you said earlier about social media and just showing it to people. I think whenever you want to spend money, just take a moment and think, do you want to buy whatever it is? Do you want to buy it because you want it, or you want to buy it to just show it to others? And be it anything, international trip, maybe. Is it like, do you really want it? Or you want to just show it to people, ki, I'm going for an international trip. Whatever you want is what you should be spending money on. Because if you keep spending money on just, to show it to people, actually, this book by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money, over there he has said this in that book. If you are, rolling in a very fancy car, you may think that people are getting impressed. But what actually ends up happening is people are just jealous. When you're leaving your car for that valet, this fancy car, you may think that he will get impressed. No, he's just looking, okay, so this is such a fancy car, so this probably he has a lot of money. So when I get his car back, I'll be getting a good amount of tip. So focus on what matters to you, spend money there. And of course, as Aditi has also pointed out, be aggressive with your savings. It's important. It's just that you'll be able to reach your financial goals much faster.
Does that answer your questions, Neha, or your
that really helped answer my question. And also, I'm not earning right now, but I'd love to plan for the future. So even if I'm given pocket money, I try to kind of work my way through it as if it's my salary, so that when I earn my first salary, maybe I can use those tips. And these tips are really helpful to think financially from now. So thanks a lot for the tips.
Okay, thanks, Neha. Leslie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ankit. I thank you all for having this forum. And Aditi, I really appreciated how you shared that not everything comes from, the scars can also come from good things, because I also agree that I received financial scars from my parents. And what I am doing right now is just reflecting back so that I can move forward in a more healthy way. And I love my parents, so I'm not trying to blame them. I just am accepting that their generation's thinking helped to create me the thinking that I had. So I am learning from their mistakes, and then also taking my experiences and looking at them differently. So I am changing my thinking. I am writing things down and refraining from judging myself and judging others. And like Ankit was sharing just now about how other people perceive you, we don't know. We may believe that they think one particular way, because when for example, my dad purchased this very expensive car, and he was very proud of himself because he worked very hard to get it. And he purchased it, but he had a car note. So from that, I learned, okay, anytime I see somebody with a new car, I see it as a liability, as opposed to just, they have a lot of money. I'm like, no, they've got new debt. So those are just some wonderful, I just really appreciate how all three of you have shared and opened up. And this just resonated with me, because I'm definitely trying to use my scars to overcome more than just financial issues, but other things. So just thank you all.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks for sharing this story. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have Renisha.
Thank you, first of all, for this wonderful session. Heard of this concept of financial scars before, so it has really helped me, just discover this new avenue of financial concept that you've talked about. So it's been great. So you've talked about, how to identify financial scars, and, just knowing about them can be the first step to getting over these financial scars. But don't you feel these days it's very difficult to change any habit, and more so a financial habit? It's not so easy to change somebody's spending habits. Even like the anecdote that you shared, that, of your student who just got into this habit of spending a lot, and even after her business wasn't doing well, she couldn't stop. So what are some tips that you would give to me as a student? So going forward, I would keep them in mind while I'm taking care of my financials or making the wrong decisions. So, just know that, okay, this is not going the right way, and maybe I should stop and, just introspect about it. So how do you identify that?
Renisha, great question, and I love that you're already thinking. Honestly, I got interested in it because my first manager, who happened to be female as well, just pulled me aside when I got my first, bonus increment, and she was just like, "What are you planning to do with it?" And I was like, "I don't know. I was just going to put it in a fixed deposit or something." And then, she just like sat me down and just said, "Dude, like save your money. This is what you can do. 2, 3 like maybe it was a 5-minute conversation, but it really changed the way that I was thinking about it, and it just made me conscious. So the fact that you're conscious about this, Renisha, number one, is like already half the battle won, is my honest to God opinion. So that's like kudos to you. In terms of like how to change habits in general, obviously, like it's such changing any habit is very, very difficult, right? Like we know that we can avoid some 90% of diseases in the world if we just exercise regularly, but how many of us are able to stick to that? I think it's much broader topic to cover, but I would say if you have not yet read the James Clear book on atomic habits. It's very interesting. It talks about the science of like habit building and how actually you can build better habits. In terms of specifically building better financial habits, my biggest advice would be to really look through where you've spent your money in the last, let's say, 5 months since the beginning of 2023, right? Once you do that, you yourself will realize like what are the things that you're good at, what are the things that you need some help with, what are some things that you're maybe not as happy about, and that will allow you, like, information really is power when it comes to these kind of things where there is so much data available to you. Think about if you wanted to change any habit, any other habit, or in other parts of your life, it would be hard to even get the basic data. Here the data is very widely available to you because everything is essentially in an SMS message, and there are many tools that track where exactly you are spending and what's happening, right? So look into it. Don't shy away from looking into whatever has been happening, and then just in a non-judgmental way analyze what are the things that you're doing well, what are the things where you feel that you need support. And there are a lot of communities, accountability groups that you can be a part of. I feel, Ankit, you may be able to add more to this.
No, actually, I think what you said is, pretty amazing. Renisha, I'll just quickly add, just a recent, not story, just a life event, you can say, or just a story of a client. So, I mean, to the point ki, changing habits are difficult, but if you have the willpower, you can do it. I'll just give sharing a story of a client. So when he came to us first, he was living in Bangalore, and he was living in a 2 BHK alone because occasionally his parents used to visit him, and he was paying something like 32,000. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, you should definitely see if you can move to a shared apartment or something when you have one room, or even if you want to live alone, maybe a cheaper apartment, maybe just a 1 BHK or something. And he was like, okay. And then just a couple of months later, he changed his job. He moved to Mumbai, and I don't know how, but he was paying 14,000 in Mumbai. I have no idea how he did it. But he was like, Ankit, so and after that I was talking to him, and he told me, he was like, how did you do it? I was like, no, you mentioned that, I should cut down my rent, and you gave me an indication of around 15,000. So yeah, I was able to find a place for 14,000. I was like, wow, kudos. So, when you try, it is not going to be easy, but when you try, you will be able to, do it.
Right. One last thing that I wanted to add here, like specifically talking about this, I'm sure Wealth Hub has at some point, written or talked about it. But I think like understanding that every time you are trying to enter a job, right, there is scope for negotiation. So I'll give you a very interesting metric. While running School of Future, we had like, I don't know how many, but easily like 100 plus interviews. Out of that, maybe we made job offers to about like 30 people or so. Out of those 30 people, probably 1 or 2 negotiated their salary with me. And while I didn't have a massive range to even negotiate in, the people who asked for more essentially ended up getting more. And this may sound like, really like whatever, I don't know, like why should I ask for more, all of that. but it never hurts to ask. You should always ask. And also on the other end, like, your employer is expecting you to ask. If you don't, you're basically leaving money on the table. And just like understanding that, some of that, these negotiations, everything obviously will become better at in life as more time goes on. But get in the habit of like not feeling scared to ask about things like this, right?
Renisha, I hope that answers your question.
It really does. Thank you for these tips and tricks. I'll keep them in mind going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Renisha. So, okay, now moving on to building financial resilience. Few of the things, as Aditi has already covered, right? How is it that you build a financial resilience? I think that, just be a little proactive in developing a solid foundation. Few of the elements that Aditi has, already covered about, that knowing how much money how much money you need for your emergency. That having that emergency fund in place, having some insurance in place, so that you can feel financially secure. And also building towards passive income. See, when you know you have money, you don't need to prove it to anyone. Actually, the best example is Warren Buffett, right? He still, his car is still the roughly $10,000 Lincoln. If he wants, okay, I would like to buy a fancy car, he can't just buy a BMW. He can buy the company BMW without thinking much about it. But he doesn't need to do that, right? Because he doesn't need to have a fancy car just to prove that he has money. So, as I mentioned earlier, when you're spending money, do it for yourself. If there is something that you want, that is something that you would like to get, you would like to have, do it. Why not? Don't do it just because if I have this, I'll look so cool. My friends will really like it. Don't do that, because that's a slippery slope. As Aditi has pointed out earlier, this student of hers who kept buying stuff just to impress people. That is a very slippery slope. So try to avoid that.
One more thing, Ankit, sorry to interrupt. I just had to kind of jump in, and we talk about FOMO in almost every episode. So FOMO is also something, right? Like many times, because I feel this, it's like if I don't event or if I don't go to this networking session, I might miss out. And I think this is not only in terms of events, but in other things as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
I almost feel like a friend of mine, because he came up with this term called JOMO, joy of missing out. And like, honestly, I think that's a really big thing to think about, right? You do, yes, there is like, also just the number of things happening, like none of our parents or anyone, like I know who is over 60 years of age, has been involved in like as many things or has had that much information, community, everything on their fingertips as we have, which means that we have to learn how to navigate all these new spaces, right? So I really I'm a big fan of JOMO and joy of missing out, and I really truly appreciate when I don't show up to things that I don't want to be at. And I think it goes back to like sort of prioritizing the things that actually matter and where you can genuinely help and add value to yourself or to the people that you're working with and serving.
So I think I love it. I love this JOMO.
I was just going to say, I'm going to keep that in mind. I mean, as entrepreneurs, anyways, you have limited time and money. So this really helps. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Cool. Okay, and one more thing that I would like to add for, in terms of how to build financial resilience is, just gaining confidence. And it's not an easy thing to do. But do not hesitate in asking for, external help, I think. Indians are generally not very good at asking for help, but just find that group, that community where you can open up and surround yourself with this supportive network with these like-minded people who can enjoy JOMO and maybe share these JOMO stories. I think instead of FOMO, JOMO stories are going to be more powerful, and I think it's going to add a lot more value to your own financial journey. Surround yourself with such people. And actually, we have a community on WhatsApp that you can join, but we'll add a description, the link to that in the description of this event. So that if you want, you can join that community.
If we can take a moment to just summarize today's conversation, that would be great.
I think there are 2, 3 key notes to take away. First would definitely be, please, like, I know it's really hard, but I also think it's also really easy once you start doing it. Actually, first of all, a disclaimer, right? Everything we have said, we have all also done. So it's not like there is any way to be insanely good at finances and you'll never make a mistake again, and you won't have any issues ever again. The world is really, really strange when it comes to finances. I was just consulting with Wealth Hub on an insurance issue that I'm having right now with my mother-in-law's policy, right? So things will happen and stuff will break for sure. So don't punish yourself and don't feel like, that this is the end all and be all of everything, because all of these are decisions that we make every single day. The only thing we can really do is be forgiving, gentle to ourselves, and to look at things deeply, right? So please go look at the expenses that you've done in the last 6 months. What has genuinely made you happy? What are things that you basically did in that moment but really did not give you any joy whatsoever? So look at your spending patterns. Don't be afraid of that. Look at the things that you want to prioritize in your life, right? Like whatever they may be. For certain people who love working from home, their home is essential because it's not just the space where they relax, it's also the space where they work, and they may decide to invest a lot more in their working environment. For example, during COVID, actually, I think in the first few months itself, I was running like 12-hour, 14-hour days, and I had a shit chair, and my husband gifted me with this like really fancy, expensive chair, which I never would have bought for myself, and I'm sitting on it right now 3 years later, and I swear to God, it's one of the best investments we've ever made that has genuinely helped me in my life. So, just thinking through it in that way is critical and will help the most. Third piece of advice that I would say is that I believe everyone in the world should be in therapy. I am a big, big proponent of it. I think it just helps. And so if you can find a money therapist specifically, that would be amazing. But even if not that specifically, I think all therapists will be able to talk about money at a broad level at least, because they have experiences with clients. So, explore that option if that's something that is interesting to you. And yeah, lastly, I would say that be aggressive about saving, as I said earlier. I think there are a lot of young people listening right now. It's just one of those things that will reap much higher returns in your future than you can even imagine right now. Yeah, I'll pass it to you, Ankit. Please do add.
Sure, thanks, Aditi. So, as Aditi said, this is not an easy journey, and I think nothing worthwhile is. So it is a difficult journey, and as Aditi was pointing out, one of the biggest problem that people face is just managing their expenses. We have a number of clients, who just can't control their spending, and whatever the reason may be, but they just can't control their spending. It's difficult, but if you don't become mindful about it, and no one is asking you to become a miser, just be more conscious about it, as we discussed earlier. Be mindful about it, because if you don't do that, if you don't become mindful about it, you will never be able to break that vicious cycle. You'll always be stuck. Something happened, some X thing happened, Y thing happened, and you'll be stuck there. Try to get out of it. Do not hesitate in taking help. Talk to people you can trust. Join a community, as Aditi was pointing out. If you can find a therapist, talk to that person. And it's important, many a times, the whatever has been built up inside you, and it's not just about the financial aspect of things. Once you have just taken it out of your chest, you already feel better about it. And when you have done that, you have acknowledged, you have done that, that is when you're on your way to make improvements. So try to do that, and I think that will help you in a long way. And I just hope and wish everyone a great financial future. Yeah, so that's kind of it from me.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Aditi, for firstly introducing this topic to us, and then coming and spending an hour talking about it. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Okay, thanks, Aditi. Thanks everyone for attending. It was lovely interacting with people, and lovely that so many people had so many questions, and they wanted to interact. Always fun to talk to people. Thank you so much for your time, and all of you have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye bye. Good night.